Hello everyone and welcome to the 32nd live stream of our space shooter DevVenture. So this is just about an error message I was trying to sort out, don't worry about that. Okay, now I'm trying to carry on from where we left off in our last session, which was last week Thursday. So as you can imagine, I'm a bit unfamiliar with where we left off, so I just need to familiarize myself with our progress and where we need to go from here so that we can actually make progress without actually going back and trying to figure things out too much. All right, so excuse me. Okay. So I wanted to know if there's a way to get the type of a node from GDScript. If you don't know what the type of the node will be before the runtime starts. And yes, you can get the class. Wait, is this the start or the end of the... No, this is the end of it. Okay, cool. I'm still not sure what we were doing. This doesn't really help. Maybe I should go another prompt up and see what's going on. Please excuse all of the scrolling. Unfortunately, I'm still not sure what we're supposed to be doing. I thought I checked something by the time of the end of our live stream, which was to add something as a child to the tree. Didn't I do that? I'm sure I did this. Let me ask this DeepSeek if I actually asked it that question. So let's see here. Did I ask you if it's possible to assign a node to a tree at runtime? I think I did, but I'm not sure anymore. Please confirm. Interesting. I think I'm being gaslighted. I definitely did ask it. So apparently it didn't save my progress, and now it's not sure if I did anymore or not. But if I go back into the videos, I'm almost sure I did ask this question already. Anyway, here's what it's telling me. No, you haven't asked me about adding nodes to the scene tree at runtime in this conversation. The topics we've covered recently have been enemy ship behavior systems and architecture, signal connections and error fixes, collision shape creation and resource management, level configuration systems, node type checking and class names, and extracting seek behavior into separate nodes. You haven't specifically asked about dynamically adding nodes to the scene at runtime. This would be a new topic if you'd like to explore it. Are you thinking about dynamically spawning enemy ships, waypoints, or other nodes during gameplay? Okay, so here's the idea I had at the end of the last session. And I wanted to take the player controller, which is this thing, and I wanted to separate it from the ships. And I think I'm not even thinking anymore. I know I said this already. This is where we left off. I wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure that no matter what type of ship, vessel, whatever you want to call it, whatever vessel the player chooses will have exactly the same player controller assigned to it. But I don't want to enable it at runtime. I want to assign it at runtime so that I don't have to make multiple scenes. Okay, so there are three ways I can do this, right? Either I create multiple scenes. So I have a player mining vessel and an NPC mining vessel and an enemy mining vessel, right? So I've got three types of mining vessels. And again, remember there was the space-time complexity trade-off. So there's this option where we have three types of mining vessel and three types of defender vessel and three types of pirate vessel. But as you can imagine, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of unnecessary changes to the same vessel, right? So if I make one change to the NPC vessel, and I want that change to be ubiquitous across all three, I'll have to change it in the other two as well. And if I forget, then there's a bug, and then it's causing problems, right? So there's remember the dry principle, don't repeat yourself, right? So I don't want that. Then the other way, of course, is to have only one vessel, one mining vessel, right? Or one pirate vessel, or one defender vessel, and have parts of the script enable and other parts of the script disable according to whichever group the vessel gets assigned to at the start of the scene, right? At the start of the level, whatever that level is. Now, having conditional parts of your script, right? Every single frame call is a bit excessive, right? So then again, there's the space-time complexity trade-off. So this one takes time because every update, every single frame of your game will now check, is this a player or an NPC? You know, so when the player clicks left click, then all the mining vessels in the scene are going to check, hey, am I the player? Oh, no, I'm not. Okay, then don't spin the barrel and don't start mining, right? That's a bit unnecessary. You want it to be only a one kind of, you only want the one mining vessel that actually is the player to be doing these checks, if at all, right? And the best way to do that, of course, is to have a component, right? So there's this design pattern called composition. And I think, like most of you will understand what that is as soon as I start explaining it. And for those of you who don't, it's quite simple. It's basically a pattern like this. So let me just enable my drawing tablet so I can actually explain things. Wait, did I say main display? Yes, apply. Okay, here we go. So now if I zoom in on this, right, it's going to be something like this. I go there. Okay, now I know where I am. And I change the pen to white. Okay. You think of composition as if there's a vehicle, right? A vehicle has, I'll just draw the rough shape of a car, something like that. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's free. It's freehand, so what can you do, right? And then you've got a wheel here. And this is a collapsed view, so it's like if you take the car and squish it and then the tires fall out like that, it's, you know. So you've got tires, right? I should probably make the tires a different color to emphasize my point a bit more. So the tires are red. And the engine is yellow. Right? And then the fuel tank at the bottom here is green. The fuel line that connects them is blue. Right? And then you carry on adding more and more parts to the vehicle, right? And then you've got your brake caliper, whatever, your brake discs and calipers. Those will be pink or magenta, whatever color this is. And then you add like a cyan color for the exhaust pipe that goes from the engine all the way out to the back of the vehicle. And then it's obviously got that like flare over here to reduce the pressure of the gas flow, and so on, right? Now, all of these things are different parts, and each part is specialized for a certain task, right? But together, they make a car, a vehicle, right? And this vehicle could be a truck, it could be a it could be an ordinary vehicle, it could be a motorbike, it could be a quad bike, it could be anything, right? The point is that all of these parts come together in a certain way with certain components, and they are composing a specific type of vehicle. So if I were to draw this in terms of class inheritance, object-oriented principle stuff, right? That would mean I go like this. Vehicle. Right? So all vehicles are, like, a vehicle is the most universal term for all of these, and it's also the least specialized, right? It's the most general. It doesn't have all the features. It just has some of them, right? And then from that, you've got children classes, things like a car, right? Or a motorbike. Actually, we'll just say there are two kinds of vehicle, right? So the one is an LMV, which is a light motor vehicle, and the other one is an HMV, or a heavy motor vehicle, right? And then from these, you've got other classes. So you've got a bike, like a motorbike. and you've got a car. And then an HMV, you've got things like a truck, and a van, for example. Okay, and so on. Now, you can specialize more and more and more and more if you want to, but the point is that there's these terms, right? So inheritance is a, right? So there's this classification called is a, right? And then you've got these placeholders. So you say B is a C, right? Where, or rather, we'll change it to be C is a B. C is a B. And I say C and B because we've already got A over here, right? And the point here is child, or maybe we'll change B to P. Now it makes more sense, right? So you're saying child, let's change the color here, yellow. You're saying child is a parent. So child is a type parent as well. This is polymorphism. It's a type of trait you get with object orientation, where a child is both the class it is, right? So if you're talking about a car is a light motor vehicle, and that's the direct parent, but also the grandparent. A car is a vehicle, right? And a vehicle is also a car in certain situations, but not all situations. So you could say all cars are vehicles, but not all vehicles are cars, right? That's true. So this here is inheritance and polymorphism. Then you've got composition, right? Now composition is different. So you're saying C and a P, or maybe not a P. We'll change this to E, right? And now we'll write here instead of is a, we'll use the has a. As an. Okay, so if I use, we'll go with white. Okay, so we'll say child, or maybe a class. A class has an element. Okay, a class has an element. This here is composition. So let me write that down. This is composition. Now, if I have made this clear to you, then we can go into the whole point of this, right? Now I want to separate here. I want to take this player controller and separate it from the mining vessel and add it in during runtime as a component, right? And this will make it composition, right? So at runtime, if I start a scene where the player needs to be a mining vessel, I instantiate the mining vessel and attach the player as a controller to the mining vessel. Okay, now I am 100% sure that I asked DeepSeek about this and it gave me answers, and somehow it lost that memory and now it's trying to gaslight me. So let's just ignore the fact that it's trying to gaslight me, and get that information back by rewriting the prompt, because there's just no way of moving forward without doing that. Okay, let's do that. So is it okay? Then let me ask. Okay, let me tell you this. I'm sure I asked you this already. I feel like I'm being gaslighted by your denial. Regardless, let's try this again. I want to assign my player controller to the various ship types on demand. This means that the player will select a level / settings, a level or a setting to play as the mining vessel, for example, and the player controller will be attached to the mining vessel only once the scene starts. This reduces unnecessary complexity by separating the components into a single point of modification, i.e. composition modification, right? A single point of modification, i.e. composition, comma, so I don't need to enable / disable sections of the script depending on whether the player should control it or not. Okay, so from the top, I asked you this already. I feel like I'm being gaslighted by your denial. Regardless, let's try again. I want to assign my player controller to the various ship types on demand. This means that the player will select a level or a setting to play as the mining vessel, for example, and the player controller will be attached to the mining vessel only once the scene starts. This reduces unnecessary complexity by separating the components into a single point of modification, i.e. composition, so I don't need to enable or disable sections of the script depending on whether the player should control it or not. Is this possible? Ignore implementation details for now and tell me only if it's possible. Yes, this is absolutely possible. You can attach scripts or nodes to other nodes at runtime in Godot. The player controller can be dynamically added to whatever ship type the player selects when the scene starts. This is a common and recommended approach for component-based architecture where you compose behavior at runtime rather than using complex inheritance hierarchies. There we go. So now we can go a little bit deeper into the implementation. Okay. Thank you for clarifying this for me. Let's go one step down into the details now. I said clarifying. Thank you for clarifying this for me. Let's go one step down into the details. Let's go one step further into the details. Okay. I want to ensure the player controller always spawns in the same location and that the location is always correct. So it's not enough that it's always the same place, it always has to be the right place, right? And then is it a good idea to use a placeholder node i.e.3D marker or a node 3D? Is it a good idea to use a placeholder node to store the location in its transform and then use that node's information to copy and paste into, or rather to set the location of the player controller node? Given that the player controller node is or rather has the camera, the positioning is vital. A second question we can answer this one next is how I can influence the entire mining vessel scene, or mining vessel node rather, as a child of the root. Do I need to give the player controller some kind of permission? Or must I, set it as the root? of the scene, or of the mining vessel. Thank you for clarifying this for me. Let's go one step further into the details now. I want to ensure the player controller always spawns in the same location and that the location is always correct. Is it a good idea to use a placeholder node, i.e. a 3D marker or a node 3D, to store the location in its transform and then use that node's information to set the location of the player controller node, given that the player controller node has the camera and its positioning is vital? A second question, we can answer this one next, is how I can influence the entire mining vessel node as a child of the root. Do I need to give the player controller some kind of permission, or must I set it as the root of the mining vessel? So the first question, yes, using a placeholder node is an excellent approach. This is actually a best practice in game development. Common patterns include spawn point nodes like node 3Ds with just position and rotation, and then a player start, which is the marker, or a level entry, which is a location node. The benefits: designers can visually place spawn points in the editor, and it's easy to move or reposition without code changes. Multiple spawn points for different game modes, clean separation of data like position and the logic, which is the player controller. And the answer to your second question, you have several options for controlling the mining vessel. Option 1, player controller as root. Make the player controller the root and set the mining vessel as a child, right? And the second option, player controller as a child, mining vessel as the root, player controller as a child. The third option, external control, which is recommended, both under a common parent. Player controller references mining vessel, and option 3 is usually the best. It keeps both nodes separate but allows the player controller to control the mining vessel through references, maintaining clean architecture. Which approach appeals to you for your game structure? So, adding the mining vessel to the player controller seems like a smart idea. I haven't thought about option 3 before. How would I do this in practice? Would I need to create the so-called level root from the script and assign both the mining vessel and the player controller to it as children at runtime? Or would I just add them both to the scene, to the current scene, and then in brackets as the level root, and reference them this way? Option 3 in practice. You would typically create the level root in your scene file in the editor and then add both nodes as children of it. The scene structure created in the editor. So here's the main scene, which is the root of the entire scene. Then you've got a level root, which is the root node of the control bundle or the player bundle, and that would be a node 3D. Then you add the mining vessel and the player controller to this in the main scene, right? And the implementation function ready variable level root is the level root from the editor. Then you get the mining vessel, which is already set up as a child of the level root for that particular level, and then create and add the player controller at runtime. So variable player controller is player controller scene.instantiate level root add child player controller. Player controller.controlled ship is a mining vessel. The player controller.global transform is spawn point.global transform. And the benefits of this is the scene structure is clear in the editor. There's no runtime parent changing, which is more stable. It's easy to reference siblings through the common parent, and it's designer friendly, so everything is visible and placeable. You design the hierarchy in the editor, then at runtime you just instantiate the player controller and wire up the references between the existing mining vessel and the new player controller. Does this approach make sense for your game architecture? No. I don't like this approach. It's too manual. I want the level to be script generated and dynamic. I don't like, or rather, I don't want to handcraft every possible level in the editor. Option, what was option? Player controller as child, player controller as a root. Option 1 seems like the best choice for my needs. We create, or rather we instantiate the player controller and add the mining vessel as a child, thereby giving us full control over its movements. You mentioned option 3 is the best practice. You mentioned you liked option 3 the most. So explain to me what the possible problems are with this approach. You're absolutely right to question this. Let me explain the potential problems with option 1, where the player controller as the root and the ship as the child. The problems with option 1, scene hierarchy confusion. The ship feels like it should be the main entity and not a child component. It's visually confusing in the editor. The ship appears subordinate to the controller, And then, so that's in the scene hierarchy. And then in terms of physics and transform inheritance, the ship's transforms inherit from the player controller. This can cause unexpected behavior with collisions, rotations, and scale inheritance. If the player controller moves, the ship moves with it. This might not be what you want. Well, this is exactly what I want. But okay, limited flexibility. It's hard to swap ships at runtime. You'd need to reparent the entire hierarchy, which is difficult and it's difficult to have multiple controllable entities. This complicates networking and synchronization. So which entity is the real one? And then in terms of architecture purity, it mixes controller logic with being a scene root. Controller becomes tied to the scene structure rather than being a pure component. Here's why I suggested option 3. It keeps the architecture clean. The controller controls the ship. The controller controls. The ship is being controlled. They are peers and not parent and child. But your approach is valid. If you prefer option 1 and understand these trade-offs, it can definitely work. Many games do this successfully. The key is being aware of the potential pitfalls. Would you like me to help you implement option 1, or would you prefer to reconsider option 3 with a more dynamic approach? If it's possible to make option 3 fully dynamic, without requiring me to manually create the level root setup for every single game level, then let's explore this one. Okay, if it's possible to make option 3 fully dynamic, then let's explore this option further. And by fully dynamic, I mean it doesn't require me to manually create the level root setup for every single game level. Perfect. Option 3 can be fully dynamic. No manual editor setup is required. Here's how. So this is a suggestion, and then there's an even more dynamic level generator, which looks like this. And here's the benefits of option 3. There's zero manual setup, clean separation, easy ship swapping, flexible architecture, and there are performance benefits. All right, so zero manual setup means completely script generated. Clean separation means controller and ship are peers. Easy ship swapping is that you just change the ship. You just change which ship gets controlled. And flexible architecture means that it works with any ship type. And in terms of performance, there's no unnecessary parent-child transform inheritance. And this gives you architectural cleanliness. It gives you the architectural cleanliness of option 3 with dynamic generation. Okay, so let's just go through this and kind of figure out what exactly DeepSeek is trying to suggest to me. Okay, so in your main scene, you have in the ready function a step where you create the level root dynamically. So you have a level root variable and assign it a new node 3D. You give it a name and you add a child to the scene called level root, right? Then in step 2, you create and add the mining vessel dynamically, right? So you've got a mining vessel, which is a preload of a scene, which is instantiated. And then you add that to this newly created level root node as a child, right? Then you say position mining vessel at the spawn point. Mining vessel.global transform is spawn point.global transform. and then you create and add a player controller dynamically. Your player controller is the preload of the player controller scene dot instantiate. You add that as a child to the level root, and then you wire them together. Player controller dot controlled ship is mining vessel. And then you position the player controller, which is optional, which might use the ship's position. Player controller dot global transform is spawn point dot global transform. So the spawn point is being implied here, right? We don't actually have a spawn point yet. But the point, the thing it's trying to communicate here is we set up a spawn point in the ship where the player controller should be, where we want that controller node to go. So the camera is positioned and rotated and everything correctly, right? And then we call that, in this case, it's called spawn point, right? And then we give that to the player controller as its global transform. And then we modify the player controller to take in the mining vessel as a controlled ship. And in its controls, it's going to manipulate this controlled ship, right? So we'll have to go into the script of our player controller and change it so that it's not just changing its rotation and its position and its speed and its everything, right? We need to be changing we need to change the behaviors of the controlled ship as well, right? And the reason why I think I like this even better is in the case where you might want to have a ship. So I'm just going to draw something. So what it wants me to do is it wants a clean separation like this. Okay. If I draw the level root, let's just go back to the white pen for now, and we'll say this level root right? As you can see, I'm getting a little better at my single stroke characters. So the level root has both a mining vessel, the only two letters that I can't do in one stroke at this moment is the I and a J because they need a dot. Mining. They don't really need a dot, but for clarity, they kind of do, right? So mining vessel. And the other one it has is a player controller. That's not a single stroke. The key is to start from the bottom to get a single stroke T. Okay. So you've got the level root, you've got the mining vessel, and you've got the player controller. Here's the thing though. If you want the player controller to influence the mining vessel, it needs to send a message to the mining vessel saying, do something. Right? And that do something could be adjust your speed, change your rotation, or anything. But there could be a case where so instead of saying directly to the root, right? Because you might want that. You want the camera to turn with the ship. Then you might think, okay, well, maybe we can send a message instead to the level root to say do something, right? Do a global something. this isn't the best way to go about it, because that means everything will always be global, right? What happens if I want to do a local something with only the player controller? So let's change this to yellow. That would be an internal message to itself, which is do a local something. Okay, now that looks kind of like a Y. So you can kind of see the difference here, right? If I had, for example, in my, let's just go to the mining vessel. Inside here, if I wanted, for example, to have, if I added an internal to the ship, right? I had like a cockpit with different displays and controls and levers and all kinds of cool stuff, right? And I wanted to make it that the player can look around in the ship without steering the ship at the same time. For example, by holding down left, not left click, right click. By holding down right click and moving the mouse, they'll be able to, in essence, turn the player's head around and look around the cockpit, right? To do that, I would need to have this local something control, right? Because that will only change the position and rotation and whatever else of the player's controller. It won't change the mining vessel. And so this is why the level root pattern actually works better. And instead of making a global something, I would say do something to the mining vessel directly, right? So, hey, mining vessel sibling, why don't you adjust your speed to go, instead of going 25% full speed, go 100% full speed, or accelerate or decelerate, or turn by this amount on these axes, or use this quaternion or whatever it is to rotate, right? And that will work nicer, because now you don't have to go through the level root every time and affect both no matter what. Now you have this separation. It's nice and modular in that way. So I hope that makes sense. And then here's an even more dynamic level generator script, right? So you've got this function called load level, which takes in a level configuration, right, of type level config. So that means I'm going to have to create a level config type, but okay, we'll get there. Then you create the level root, right? Create a new node 3D, add it to the scene after giving it a name. So you say level underscore plus level config dot level name, because again, you're giving that in as a parameter. And then you add that to the scene as a child. And then you create the player ship. You create the, the player ship. You create the player controller, and then you spawn the level content. And these, of course, are undisclosed functions that need to be defined still. Now, excuse me. If we go through what we've gone through this now, right? I actually like option 3 a lot. It's just that there's quite a bit of modification we'll have to do to the player controller now. Okay. So let's say that I like what you are doing with option 3 now. There is a consideration, however, with this approach. The player controller currently assumes that rotating itself will rotate the ship as well, because I initially created the controller as a section of the full script for the player, i.e. a not so modular script containing all the behaviors a player would need in one monolithic script. This consideration will require us to change the way the player controller controls things. It will need to check if the controller only needs to make a local change, e.g. a head turning in the cockpit effect, or a global change e.g. steering the ship. And keeping the camera looking forward at the same time. Ignore simultaneous control I.E. looking around while steering. Ignore simultaneous control for now, i.e. looking around while steering, because we can tweak things later if required. You've identified the core architectural challenge. This is exactly why option 3 is a better long-term, or rather is better in the long run, right? It forces you to separate concerns properly. The separation you need. The player controller's responsibilities are input handling, camera control, UI interaction, or high-level command decisions, like go here and shoot that. Then there's the ship responsibilities, which is physics, movement, rotation and steering, weapon systems, health and damage, and so on. So there's a revised control flow. In the player controller, if there's an input like turn left, the command to the ship, then you command the ship to turn, don't rotate the controller. You say control ship.rotate ship turn by an amount. And if the if there's an action like look around that's pressed, then you make a local camera rotation only. So you say camera.rotate rotate Y for whatever the look amount is, right? And in the physics process, or rather the process function, because they're separate, right? There's a physics process and a normal process. In this case, just process. Then camera follows the ship, but it can have independent rotation. The global position is controlled ship to global position, but the camera can rotate independently for looking around, if required. And then the benefits of having this separation is that the ship moves itself. So the physics stays with the ship. The controller commands the ship like a pilot, not the ship itself. And there's an independent camera which can look around the ship while it's moving forward. And then there's clean architecture. So each component has clear responsibilities. This forces you to refactor that monolithic script, but it's a good thing. It leads to much more maintainable and flexible code. Okay, so now I have it on record and in my memory that we've talked about this with DeepSeek. Okay, so now you're on my side. If it gaslights me again, you know, okay? We can carry on with this in the next session because we kind of ran out of time here. But I did need to spend this time to kind of think about what we were working on and what we need to do, right? The other thing that we still have to do, of course, is fix testing seek behavior because it's currently not working, right? That we need to do as well. We still have to make sure that when the scene starts, that the NPC behavior manager communicates with the player, the enemy ship controller, which tells the pilot to move, right? We need to set up that whole pattern system. Okay, so there's two pathways that we have to be going down. And I think the player controller thing was kind of a digression from our original path. So maybe we should get back to fixing the seek behavior so it actually does its job again. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, let's leave it there. We've already gone over an hour. Okay, so I'm gonna make a shout out to Cubes. Thank you so much for your support. He is our junior DevVenturer and he's been supporting us for quite a long time already. So thank you very much for your support. And to the rest of you, please do visit coffee.com/mtkdev if you do want to support the channel. And I'll see you all